Let's see. It is 7:01 p.m. I call the October 24th meeting of the Carver School Committee to order. If everyone could please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I am yellow.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Do we have anyone? Oh, Tammy is here from the EAPC.
I think Tom's here too.
Is Tom here? My apologies, Tom. I can only
I think
see.
Tammy is speaking, yeah.
Okay. Hello. Welcome.
I'm here, but he asked me to speak, which is fine. It's good to see everyone, and it's definitely, we're off to a positive start after these last 2 years. It's been so challenging. I know a lot of us feel like we're getting into the groove. However, with this challenges, now we're, doing the work to kind of get everyone back into the mindset of learning, while also keeping in mind the social emotional health of our children and after living through such a challenging time. So that's where we stand right now. I also wanted to take this opportunity because on November 8th, there's the opportunity to vote with our midterm elections, and I know I just wanted to speak on behalf of the MTA and in favor of the Fair Share Amendment. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that is. And as a very dedicated educator, I believe that putting aside in the Constitution the language that they are presenting in the Fair Share Amendment will benefit all of our schools across Massachusetts, making sure that the money is there when our schools and our infrastructures need them. So the Fair Share Amendment is proposed to amend the Massachusetts Constitution, creating an additional tax of 4% points on the portion of a person's annual income above $1 million. The new revenue, approximately $2 billion a year, will be spent on quality public education and affordable public colleges and universities, and for the repair and maintenance of roads, bridges, and public transportation. To ensure the amendment continues to apply only to the highest income taxpayers who have the ability to pay more, the $1 million threshold would be adjusted each year to reflect the cost of living increases. This increase actually continues to be an regressive tax increase. The top 1% will be paying approximately on average 8%, where the bottom 1% pays closer to 10 to 11%. So I just wanted to kind of give that information out there. Also, just repeated federal tax cuts, 83% of the 2017 tax bills benefit went to the top 1%. In 2020, the Federal CARES Act included $135 billion in tax breaks for wealthy business owners. So I just wanted to say, just putting it out there, we're going to hope everyone would consider voting yes on one and support our schools, and so we can get closer to where all children have more than adequate, have an opportunity for an education that doesn't really necessarily depend on their zip code. So just in closing, Halloween is coming up. Love teaching that time of year. And I would love to wish everyone a very safe holiday and fun, because we get to get out there and see each other. So thank you all. I hope we all have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you, Tammy.
Tammy. Okay, so that brings us to comments from the general public. If there's anyone that is online on Zoom that would like to speak, can you just please enter your name into the chat and then we will call on you. I don't believe there's anyone here that would like to speak during public comment. We have a few audience members, but they're here to participate in our meeting. So again, if there's anyone that's on Zoom that would like to speak during public comment, now is your time. If you could please enter your name in the chat. Okay, no one has raised their hand, no one has put their name in, so we shall move on, and that brings us to comments from the Captain's Council. So welcome. we have Alyssa Weston and Gianna Ioronimo from the girls soccer team. So thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Weston.
I'm Gianna Ioronimo.
So, the Carver girls soccer team tied Mashpee 2-2 last week and are looking forward to our last 2 games. We are heading up to Malden Catholic High School tomorrow, and our last league game is on Wednesday in Rockland. The team is on track to make the state Division 5 soccer tournament, and only the top 32 teams advance. We are ranked 25 out of the 90 teams in our division.
We thank the Carver School Committee for their support during our season and cannot wait to play these last few weeks. Thank you.
That is
That
it.
is great. Thank you.
Thanks for being
Yeah.
here
Good luck,
this
girls.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good soccer. Good
You're
luck
welcome.
in the tournament upcoming.
Yes.
First game will probably be one day next week.
Of the tournament?
Yeah.
It's not decided yet. We have to wait for the power rankings to be put in after these next 2 games.
I think it closes. I think the close either Sunday or Monday, and I think you'll play one day next week.
Yeah.
Probably away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably in Western Mass.
Right?
Unfortunately.
Much like
I will be
last
real close
year.
to home.
Yeah.
But good luck and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks
Thanks for coming and good luck.
Thank you.
We'll be rooting for you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so that brings us right to approval of minutes for the October 3rd, 2022 open session minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 3rd, 2022 open session minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Excellent, and that brings us to communications.
Sorry, holding on one second. I'm just trying to get out of my waving flag video. So I was going to share the screen at home, and they were seeing the waving flag. So
No worries.
now we put the agenda up there for them. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so we're excited to announce that TLA, which is the Teaching and Learning Alliance, is a consulting group that has been providing professional development for our elementary teachers to support implementation of the new reading curriculum. And based upon our work this year, they're actually awarding the district either 2 full days or 4 half days of professional development to continue support of our teachers. So we kind of got a gold standard from them, and they want to continue to work with us, and are providing us some with additional time for free. Meredith, I don't know, I'll put Meredith on the spot. I didn't tell her I was going to ask her if she'd like to, she has any thoughts about this or the work with TLA so far.
Yeah, and
And Ruby's here as
I'll
well.
speak
She can
for
certainly-
Ruby too, but please feel free to join me. So we thus far have already used them for a few days, and it's been phenomenal professional development for our teachers as we have rolled out the first phase of our new literacy program. And one of the things that I think we've all really enjoyed about it is the model is built off of high quality professional development, which we talked to you guys about in June. But the nice piece is it's ongoing, it's job embedded, and it's very reflective of what teachers are asking for and what they feel they need. So I feel like so far it's been a very collaborative effort, and TLA has worked very closely with Ruby, myself, and Kate Moore, our literacy coach. So it's been nice to be able to build that. And then when TLA is not with us, the Kate will go in and coach with teachers. So it just is ongoing support for the teachers and quality professional development.
That is great. Thank you.
Very good.
Is,
News.
is TLA just doing support for the literacy program, or is there other professional development included as well in other areas?
We've only contracted with them for literacy as
Perfect.
part of the rollout. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I would just add that, what Meredith says, it's very customizable for what our teachers need. And then the other piece of it too is, while it's, job embedded for the teachers, it's also training for administrators too. So we're working along with them, and we're learning more about how we can support the teachers, how we can support the students, how we can overall support the units of study model that we're moving forward with. just to add a little, thank you.
No.
Yeah, no, that's
That's
perfect.
great.
And I mean, you can also echo this, Ruby. So far, one of the biggest bits of feedback that we've received from teachers, and obviously, anytime you embark on a new plan, there is a significant amount of work that teachers put in. But initially, the feedback that we've heard, and it's only October 24th, is how engaged students are. They're asking to read, they want to read, which is a promise that we made to everyone during our June presentation. So I think that's been amazing.
Right. It's been nice to see the students' interest in books, in especially K through 3, and watch them increase their ability to sustain to increase reading amounts of time in the classroom. So that's been interesting to watch too, because, you know, you'll think, well, 20 minutes for a student with a book. I mean, that's well, you would think maybe it's a lot of time or it's not that much time, but students are even going beyond that with a book, reading it, looking at the pages, asking questions, and just being engaged, which is wonderful to see.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the insight.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, and that brings us to reports from the superintendent.
Okay, firstly, we have personnel updates. So we have some since last time we met. We have some new hires. Roberta Doyle is an ESP lunch monitor at the elementary school. Morgan Neese is an ESP bus monitor. Madeline Benoit as a long-term substitute adjustment counselor at the elementary school. We've had a couple people transfer taking new jobs. So Roberta Grant is going from a bus monitor to being a 7D driver for us. And Kristen Freeman from a lunch monitor to an ESP special ed at the elementary school. And we did have 2 resignations, Stephen Ippolito, a bus driver, CDL, and Molly Dillon, an RBT ESP at Carver Middle High School, since we last met.
Thank you.
If it's okay, the next 2 items, B and C, I'll just kind of roll all in together, if that's okay. It's really all about enrollment and student enrollment within the Carver Public Schools. Certainly along the way, feel free to stop me or ask me questions, because I got a decent amount of information on all these different topics. And maybe I'll take some natural pauses as well. But if it's okay, I'm just going to do B and C together as one item.
Excellent. Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Just make it a little bigger on the screen for those at home. So we start with our October 1 enrollment, and October 1 is just the date selected by the state and the federal government in terms of establishing an enrollment number. So as you're looking at grants and those types of things, and when you have to put in an enrollment, they don't want it to be a wavering number, because the reality is your enrollment does kind of shifts throughout the year. Usually there's never major shifts, but there are small transitions. So they want to have a point in the year to establish this is what your enrollment is for the school year, and then you do that each year. And October 1 happens to be that date. So this is our enrollment information for October 1. Our total enrollment is 1547, which is actually up 12 students from last October. We did lose a small graduating class. There was only 74 students on October 1, which was on October 1 last year. Our entering K class was 124, which is consistent with the general average we see over the last 10 years, though I think we all know that we had that big K group last year that was 140. We do have 36 fewer students in grade 9, so that transition from grade 8 to grade 9 was a reduction of 36 students. That is a larger decrease than usual, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we transition into the student exit data. So if you actually look, you can follow the chart. It goes from October 1 of last year to October 1 of this year, and you can obviously just drop down a grade. You can see a kindergarten class that was 139 last year is 137 in first grade, and you can follow that pattern all the way down. And you'll see that actually most of our enrollments are pretty consistent, small changes in each direction a little bit, with obviously the largest drop being, as we mentioned, that 8th to 9th grade transition. And in other ways, we picked up some students along the way. And obviously always that factor of we lost a class of 87 graduates and added a class of 124. So that overall, we're on a positive trend. When you look at this number over time, if you go back 10 years ago, our enrollment was 1,722 students, so we're down about 170 students over that 10-year period. But we're actually very consistent. We're actually flatlined over the last six years. The first 4 years of that 10-year, if you look at that 10-year data, we actually went from 722 to 1596. Since that time, we've generally been a little bit around that around 1550, swinging up and down with a low of 1501. But our enrollment over the last 5 years has actually been fairly consistent in the big picture. So I want to transition next into the student exit survey and the student exit data, because I think that's going to hit on some of the movement from 8th to 9th grade. Because ultimately, every student who leaves the district, we do ask them to complete an exit survey. They're not required to do it, but we do ask every family who's leaving at all grade levels to complete the exit survey to give us some information about why they're making the move, why they're transitioning. And that will kind of start to explore that 8th to 9th grade transition. So before I move into that, any questions about just the straight numbers of October 1?
Nope.
Okay. And I know this actually was down on the agenda in number C, but I'm kind of putting these pieces together a little bit. So the entire survey I linked in your background for you to review. As I said, we ask everyone who's in the district to complete the survey. 54 families completed the survey, including 31 8th graders and 9 5th graders. So 75% of our survey data comes from those transitioning years, going 8th to 9th grade, going 5th to 6th grade, in terms of why they were moving. So I have a graphic representation that people are seeing at home, which the survey basically says, where are you going? And then it gives them a series of choices of why you decide to choose a different district or go to a different school. And these are the range of choices. And then there's a comment section, open-ended, that just allows families to make general comments as to why they're making the move. Obviously looking at the survey data, the largest selected item was vocational. So we do have, 31 of the families said they are looking to make that vocational move. 9 out of 54 families said they were moving out of town. And actually 31 of 54 selected multiple reasons. So it's not that you can only pick one reason, you can choose multiple things in the chart as to why you're moving. I did see a consistency between voc tech and curriculum. So the second highest number there is curriculum. But I don't think that's real. My sense from looking at the data is more that that's families saying we're interested in a vocational curriculum, and they checked both, that they're looking to go over to a vocational school, and then saying they're looking for a curriculum that would be offered at a vocational school, which is a little different than there's a lot of overlap in those selections when you look at the data from the families. The 20 other and the 15 peers is a little bit concerning, because I think the others you'll see in the comment section. And people made some comments saying, they felt like there are reasons here of why they might be moving, why they might be transitioning. There wasn't enough information here in the survey, these choices of athletics or electives, legacy, et cetera, so they chose other and gave some reasoning why. So in the comments, there were some general themes that we saw. Number one was just a concern about peer interactions, a concern about culture and climate in more so the middle high school than the elementary school. There was actually a lot in this exit survey data had a lot of positive comments about the climate at the elementary school, where some of the more concerning comments were about climate at the middle high school. And then there were some specific comments about bullying. So we want to be very clear about those were the concerns that were raised in the other category and something we need to look at. And then obviously some of the people just said, I'm going to the vocational school. I have interest in going to the vocational school, which, that's a huge piece of the transition. They didn't check off these other pieces. So looking at this data really makes us think about, well, what do we need to think about? What do we need to address? Because certainly we want students to stay in Carver. We want them to be here. We think there's tremendous opportunities for our students in Carver, and we want to give students the opportunity to avail themselves of the things we have to offer. But that's, the biggest thing you have to remember, and I don't know if it goes into the next slide. 46% of our families that were moving out of town were choosing the vocational school, which is certainly appropriate. I've always said publicly that I support Old Colony. We need to give students that option, that choice. There are different curriculum choices there, and tremendous opportunities for students there. So we want our students to have to be aware of that opportunity, and it's always appropriate for students to take advantage of that opportunity. Getting a little ahead of myself in the conversation, we're going to find out. Though now I'm going to make sure I say the exact right number. We have 84 students of Old Colony, 9 through 12. Sorry, I lied to you. I looked at last year's data. Let's look at the right data. We have 89 students at Old Colony this year. But if you look back over the last 25 years, we always have 90 to 100 students at Old Colony. Now, obviously, the school's population may have been a little bigger. So I just said 10 years ago, the population was 1,700 students. And at that time, we had 100 students at Old Colony. But it's very appropriate. We should have 85 to 95 to 100 students at Old Colony. There should be 20 to 25 kids who are taking advantage of that opportunity. And ultimately, it's the number one reason why people are leaving when you look at where they're going. So we have to take that into consideration. But that doesn't mean we also have to take into consideration the concerns that were raised in the exit survey. So there were some families that were raising those concerns about culture and climate and bullying. So we have to think about those things as a district and say, well, what are we going to do to improve the culture and climate, to ensure that everyone feels safe within the community? And what steps are we taking to do that? And I think that we've already taken a lot of steps this year. I think it's been a huge focus of Mrs. Cabral and the administrative team at the middle high school to improve the culture and the climate. And this isn't, I want to be real clear because this has come up in a conversation in a couple other places. This is not an indictment by me saying it was a negative culture and climate. I'm just representing what some people in the survey reported. In my mind, there's always been there's great things that happen in that building every day. There's great things that happen in the district every day, and it can be a really positive place. But people had that concern, so we have to think about that. We have to say, hey, we mentioned this concern, so what are we doing to improve that? And the clearest example of that is the wind block and the implementation of the new schedule. And a lot of the focus of that was to make it a place to give students the opportunity to try new things, to have opportunities to make more connections with the adults who they work with every day. And if there's a way to improve the culture and the climate, it's by making sure that every student feels like they're a connected student. A connected student is a better student. And we want every student in our school district from pre-K through 12th grade to feel they have some connection in the school. And that connection can differ for every student. It probably does differ for every student, whether it's the teacher who they make a strong connection with, or the athletic program, or the music program, or just their friends. We have to be always creating an environment that's going to be more positive for our students. And that's always the goal and has been a focus. We have looked at the student exit survey data. So the administrative team has seen the data at the middle high school. So we looked at it and went through comments, and we're just trying to think about ways in which that's always the focus, is let's make it a better place. In terms of the bullying piece, we've talked about this a couple times. So we are going to be doing some more direct interactions with students in terms of bullying. We're having the training from Dr. Englander on November 15th, which is going to be district-wide. We're working towards planning trainings for the students as well. We've done some initial conversations with students around bullying. And then, as always, if people have concerns about what's happening in the district, they need to come to us and they need to report them, and everything will be fully investigated, and every student and every family will be supported appropriately. And by doing that, that also is going to help improve the culture. And people need to believe that happens. And I'm telling you that happens. And those things are what's going to make everyone feel more positive. And I actually already feel at the middle high school that there is a more positive feel in the building as a whole. But I also want to say that, yes, our transition from 8th to 9th grade was higher than it usually is. That's a bigger number than it usually is. And it constituted a little less, about 30% of the class. So that's a concern, that 30% of the 8th graders made a decision to go someplace else, and something that we're looking at. And as we go forward, but that number is always going to be there. I don't know what the appropriate number is. I don't know if it's 20% of the class or 25% of the class. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later when we get into all the enrollment numbers about where kids are going to school. But yeah, there's a group of kids who should be going to Old Colony, absolutely. And we're supportive of that. And we want to support them in making those transitions. And I understand people make choices to go to other places as well, whether it's a private school like BC High or because it's a legacy. That's where the family went. That's what they've always done. And there's always those things. Some of those people said that in the exit survey. And they checked off legacy and said, this is where my family went. This is where my parents went to school, and that's where I'm going to go to school too. And all those things are appropriate. And our goal just has to be to make sure that we're having the most inviting, the best programming that we can have to support all of our students so that they can be college and career ready. Because that's what it's all about. It's not about the competition of this school does this and we do this and they do that. It's more about let's make sure we're all working together to ensure our students are college and career ready, to make sure they're ready to make that next step, and that everyone feels comfortable that they can come to Carver Middle High School and have that experience. And that's what we're always moving for. That's where we want to go. I just said a lot of words, so I'll stop and take a breath for a second. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments about the student exit data or the general enrollment overall before we start getting into the specifics of, this many kids are at charters, this many kids are at private schools, and getting into that information.
Scott, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So you mentioned the training with Dr. England and that you're going to be doing some seminars or assemblies.
With the
whatever,
students
for
as well.
The students. What about the parents? Are we planning anything? Is it something that we can do? I feel that parents are confused about how discipline and all this stuff works now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe an informative session for the parents might be helpful.
Well, Dr. England's presentation is for the entire
It's for everybody,
community.
okay.
That's for everybody. So that's specifically for the parents. But into a larger issue, I certainly could take into consideration doing some sort of, if people were interested, just a parent night where they can ask questions about processes and how does this work and what do I do. Hopefully some of that will come out through Dr. England's presentation specifically to bullying. But if people have questions about how the processes work, they can certainly reach out to us, and then we can also take into consideration whether we want to do some sort of evening specifically around that topic.
Yeah. And in reference to that as well, when are you planning on sending that information out to parents?
So we're getting together some good advertisement on the Mark Bullying presentation.
Okay.
That should be going. I'll look at Gina saying that if it hasn't gone out, it's going to go out soon this week.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah, so we
Great.
already have stuff together.
I was just thinking,
we have
November's filling up already, so we might want to
So
get that out sooner rather
November
than later.
November 15th, 6:30, and we're going to
Perfect.
start pushing that information out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions before I go into the rest of the data?
I don't have a question, but I just want to reiterate something that you mentioned for people in the community. I just implore you that if your student is struggling or having any type of an issue, to please reach out to administration in the building. It's really important that they know, because they can't help resolve the issue if they're unaware of it. So I just want to stress to people to please contact administration, because they really do care. They are committed to making it a safe space for all students and for all families. So I just want to reiterate how important it is to have open lines of communication. That's it. Anyone have any questions? Thank you for the information so far, Scott.
All right, so we'll move on to just the general statement of private school enrollment. Actually, I'm going to go back to my student exit survey data. Slowly but surely. So each year we look at where school-age children who live in Carver attend school, specifically if they're not attending the Carver Public Schools. In your background, I've linked a couple documents for your review, a list of students who live in Carver but being educated in another way, private schools or outside enrollments. that data is represented graphically here for the families at home. In your background, you have actually a specific list of school by school, how many kids are attending that specific type of school. The other thing that's in your background, which I might pull up for the community at home as well, is just a breakdown of kind of a 10-year trend in terms of number of students who are seeking educational opportunities elsewhere. So when we look at all the data, I'll just do an overview of some changes we've seen and some differences over last year. The overall number of students who live in Carver but are seeking educational alternatives has decreased since last year by 10 students. Last year it was 270 students, or 14.9% of the school-age population in Carver was seeking some sort of educational alternative. This year it's 260 students, or 14.4% of the total school-age population. 10 years ago, that number was 213 students, or 11% of the school-age population. But over that time, options have increased through charter schools, virtual academies. And that's where we get to, what's the right number? What are we seeking? And I don't know if we're seeking anything. We want more kids to stay in Carver. And I don't know if it should be the 10% number that it was 10 years ago. If that's our goal. I don't even know if I'm establishing a goal, because I've actually thought about this a lot. And because that 10%, 10 or 15 years ago, before a lot of these charter schools opened, before the virtual academies opened, really the choices at that time were Old Colony or private schools. And of that 10%, probably if we always had 90 or 100 kids at Old Colony, 6-7% of it was going to Old Colony, and 2 or 3% were going to some private school. And whether it at that time be Sacred Heart or Coyle Cassidy or Bishop Feenan or BC High would be the most common ones. And then occasionally we'd have some students at some of the prep academies like a Tabor Academy or a Milton Academy. We had some students going off to those schools as well. So I don't know if there's a perfect answer to what the number is. Obviously, over the last couple of years, the number has trended down. Back in 2021, it was actually 16.4%. That year is kind of an anomaly, though, because that was the pandemic year and a lot of families chose to stay home. So our homeschooling number that year was really high, and it's slowly come back because those families have returned to in-person learning. So that, I don't know if that's a good place to connect back to. Maybe the place to connect back to was the year before the pandemic, which was 2019, 2020. And in that year, we had 251 students seeking some sort of alternative, or 13.6% of the overall population. But just some of the trends we've seen. The largest decrease has actually been in homeschooled students. Currently, we have 40 students who are being homeschooled, representing 28 families. Last year, it was 48 students and 31 families. We have 10 students who are selecting virtual private academies. Now, this is a whole new thing. Prior to the pandemic, there were a couple virtual schools that were online. There were 2 in Massachusetts, which are actually considered charter schools. It was Greenfield Academy and Tecker Academy. But people weren't attending virtual high schools in Wyoming. But now students are, because the pandemic has created a whole new genre of schooling. So we have 10 students who are attending what we're calling private virtual academies. They're not charter schools. It's just like going to BC High. And those schools are in Missouri, Florida, Iowa, Georgia. So we have kids attend. That's where they're centered, at least. Yep. So we have kids attending virtual academies all over the country, so this is the new trend, I think. I think we're going to see that number continue to go up. Prior to the pandemic, the first time we had a student attend a virtual academy was the pandemic year, and it was 1 student. And obviously, as I said, the pandemic has kind of spread that out. So I think that's going to be a new area of growth for options for families.
I have a question.
Sure.
So with the virtual academies, a parent is choosing to enroll their child there, and they're doing this from their home. So this isn't through the school in any way, right?
Nope, this is totally unrelated. They are unenrolled.
Okay.
And they
So
are
it's
not.
It's almost like an alternative to homeschooling.
Yes,
in a way.
really. That was my next connection, is that I think most of our families who are choosing that instead of homeschooling, or it's just an avenue for homeschooling.
Right.
Because this avenue now exists.
And you're probably seeing trends that is the older student population, kind of like almost how kids are learning in college with a lot of online courses in college. So would you say that the trend is more older student population?
I believe I can give you that number if I look for a second. So currently our virtual schools, we have 1 7th grader, 1 8th grader, 2 9th graders, 2 10th graders, 4 juniors, and those are our numbers. So yeah, it's high school kids,
That makes sense.
7th grade and up.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't expect that there was elementary school, but I thought it was gonna be more concentrated on the high school
Yeah.
grades.
Yeah, it's junior high and high.
And I think that also aligns with the concept of it being more of families who might otherwise choose homeschooling. Because obviously, as you get into the high school with the varied curriculum areas, I mean, there's very few of us. I know I couldn't teach math, science, social studies, and English, and foreign language, and all the other things, and robotics, and engineering, and all the other things you take at a high school. So I think that's part of that push as well. But it's just interesting that a thing that didn't exist 3 years ago, we now have 10 students attending. And I think we will see a trend in that number going up. From a financial standpoint, it's financially neutral for us beyond those 10 students aren't here and counted as part of our student population for Chapter 78,
Right.
which I think we've talked a long time about, that we're held harmless and we have to close the gap anyhow. So we're probably a couple hundred students away from having any of our Chapter 78 change. Obviously, 10 more students in that direction would help, but it wouldn't, the reality is right now it's financially neutral for us in terms of those pieces. Our charter school enrollment has actually remained fairly steady. So we had seen a trend where that number was kind of creeping up each year. The last couple of years it's kind of stabilized. So charter school enrollment is 66 students this year. It was actually down 2 students from 68 last year. Rising Tide did increase. We went from 37 to 47 students at Rising Tide. MAP Academy actually had a decrease of 22 to 10 students attending MAP Academy. 3 of those 10, I always want to make this point, 3 of those 10 students did not attend Carver High School at any time. They were actually either attending Rising Tide or Old Colony, and then went from there to the charter school, but then the assessment comes to us because they're Carver residents. We do have 1 student who's attending Tech Virtual Academy, which is also considered a charter school in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, charter schools does have a financial impact on us, and we're always looking to see that number either hopefully be steady or decline. And it's good that it's kind of leveled off over the last couple of years. School choice, we have 6 students who are choicing out of the district. Conversely, I throw this number in here, it's not really an enrollment number, but I just want to mention it, is that we do have 64 students currently choicing in. So we're plus 56 in that category, which is where we've been the last few years. We've generally been around plus 50 students in terms of school choice. And that does have a positive financial impact on the district as a whole. And I also want to point out to the committee, as you think about school choice decisions in the future, that 15 of our school choice students were Carver residents who moved out of town, but were able to stay in the Carver Public Schools because we offered school choice. And right now we're only offering school choice in kindergarten and at the high school level. So most of those kids are high school kids who would have otherwise, if we weren't offering school choice, would have had to enroll in the new districts and the new towns in which they are living. Our agricultural enrollment, again, stayed pretty steady, 7 to 8 students. We already mentioned Old Colony a couple times in terms of where they stand. Our religious private school enrollment has actually decreased a little bit. And I also think that's just the reality of, again, choice. Students have a lot more choice than they did 15 years ago between private schools, virtual academies, charter schools. And so I think some of the private schools are feeling that a little bit as well, because that educational competition, in essence, is out there. But interestingly enough, we did have a number. This is actually a high number for us of students attending private academies like a Tabor Academy. We're actually up to 10 students, which that number is actually a little bit on the high side for us. But if students have that opportunity, that's an outstanding opportunity for them as well. And if they have the opportunity to go to one of the private academies like a Tabor Academy or a Milton Academy. So overall, what's my takeaways? Our goal is to continue to build out the pathway programs and improve the overall climate of the middle high school to encourage students to stay in Carver. Charter school attendance has been steady, and hopefully it will remain that way because it has the largest financial impact on the district. as I've mentioned in the past, being positive in school choice helps mitigate the financial impact of the charter school enrollment. So being plus 56 in school choice, that definitely helps us. And as you know, on a regular basis, we offset a portion of our budget, but year to year, depending from 400,000 to 500,000, depending on the year, from using school choice monies. So that's a key component of our budget. And hopefully we'll see a trend of students returning to the district. Hopefully we'll see our enrollment rise a little bit. And hopefully we'll see the enrollment go up and a number of students choosing other educational opportunities to go down. And I guess that the last kind of clarifying connection to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, when we had, I'm doing my quick math, I said it earlier, 210 students attending other schools. Over 101 of them were was at Norfolk, was at Old Colony, and only 12 students were attending charter schools, and there was only one school choice student, and no one was attending virtual academies. Though more students at that time were attending your private religious high schools, because that was their choice then. So it is interesting that students have a lot of choices, a lot of opportunities. Certainly choice increases as you move into the high school level. There's fewer choices, there's fewer opportunities at the elementary level. A lot of the charter schools, like Rising Tide begins in 5th grade. And MAP Academy is for high school students. So those are the big two charter schools that are drawing students from us. So that's at the high school level. And I think that's all I have, and I'll open it up to any questions or comments or thoughts that you have.
I think you just touched on one of my questions of the trend of students returning. So were you saying they go to Rising Tide during middle school and then come back? So there's a trend of them coming back?
No. So sorry if I misspoke on that. So I was saying that at the high school level, that's where more choice exists. So it makes sense that more of our students at the high school level are choosing other opportunities because they actually have them. Okay. Our Rising Tide numbers actually increased this year. Do we have students come back from Rising Tide? We always have a couple. But the number's been going up over the last couple of years, because from 4th to 5th grade, we might have anywhere from 4 to 10. I think the biggest number we had recently was 10 students go to Rising Tide. In that given year, we might have 2 or 3 kids come back. So it's a negative net loss. So I don't want to say that kids are coming back from Rising Tide for the high school, because I think that would be an inaccurate statement.
Okay.
Any other questions or thoughts or?
Thank you for all of that detail and for the 10-year comparison. I agree. And so many other districts now are offering school choice, so there are so many more opportunities, it seems, year after year, especially for, high school age students. But I wanted to ask, in terms of the pathways, is there anything upcoming this year in terms of, marketing events or sharing with the community that, could hopefully help with retention, that you guys are ready to share at this point, or will that be?
I don't know if it's anything we're ready to
later?
share. We can talk in some generalities. So
Okay.
one of the things I actually have a meeting for this week is we're currently in the process of planning like an 8th grade exploratory. So that all the 8th graders will have an opportunity during this school year to get a look at and get a sense of each of the Pathways programs and what they have to offer. And I know we've talked about doing an evening again to make it more clear for parents in terms of what we're offering. And I think we've also, another thing that's in the planning stages, is we want to do sort of like a Pathways fair. And we actually talked about doing a Pathways and PBL fair where students can show off the things they've done, make that available to the public, and have the community come in and say, look at these great things that are happening that kids are able to do. And that's where they'll learn a little bit more about the pathways. And we actually think that that might be more successful than just a informational night. If we can get the community to come in and see what the kids are actually doing. Very similar to what we did with the MET Showcase last year. Now, the MET Showcase last year was geared at local area businesses to make that collaboration, that partnership with, especially with the opportunity to maybe provide some internships for our seniors who are involved in the MET program. But if we take that concept of what we did with the MET showcase and we broaden that out and say, we're going to have students make presentations about the great things they're doing in each of the pathways and some of the PBL projects we've been doing. Because I've said PBL, Meredith and I have talked about PBL, but we actually, I don't know, Meredith, I'm looking at Meredith, like, I don't know if we've had a formalized like PBL project presentation. So one of the things maybe we should do in the next couple of months is have a couple of teachers, a couple of students come in and say, here's a project-based learning project that we did and participated in, and this is the level of engagement we had, and this is why it was valuable for us and for the community. And I think that would be valuable to do as well. But I'm rambling now. But the answer to your, the answer to your question is, the goal is that sometime in the spring is to hold a Pathways PBL showcase presentation for families. And the goal there was we would invite everybody. The entire community would be invited. I don't know how much we get from elementary school students, but we might want to think about how we can do that and have them. So it's just not the parents of the kids who are presenting that are coming.
Right.
We want the entire community to come and see the great things that are happening. The other thing is, I do think we just need to improve our communication around pathways in general. I've had some anecdotal feedback that some of the students, especially some of our 8th graders, it was creating a little bit of a stress factor for them because they were like, I have to choose a pathway. And they're like, well, yes, a pathway is a great thing, but ultimately the pathways are just a tremendous number of new elective opportunities that we didn't offer 5 or 6 years ago. And you don't have to join a pathway, but you can still take a robotics course, you can still take an engineering course, you can still take an environmental course, you can still take a biotech course, you can still take a finance course. So it's just an expansion of our elective opportunities. And where appropriate, where it's a good match for the student, it's that ability to then choose a pathway and say, yes, I really want to focus in this area because I see myself maybe working as a nurse or a doctor. So I'm going to take this biotech pathway and get all this wealth of science courses that we have to offer. I'm really interested in being a botanist, or I'm really interested in working in environmental science, so I'm going to take the environmental science pathway. But we want to ease students' pressure of they don't have to make their life choices in 8th grade in terms of everything they're going to do. And we've heard that a little bit. There was a little bit of a fear of I have to be in a pathway, and if I'm not, I'm missing out on something. So the simple answer to your question is yes.
That is great. Thank you.
If anybody remembers what the question was.
Well, because I think our pathways opportunities are, exciting for students, for staff, for our community. So from my perspective, I know that OC has already started sending out emails to students, kind of courting them with that pathway, which is the correct option for some students. And I fully support that for families that so choose it for their students. But I also just want people to hear more about the great things that we are doing in Carver in terms of our pathways. That's why I was asking, because
So Meredith this year has actually Meredith's leading a group of representatives from each of the pathways. I've been attending those meetings, but Meredith's taken the leadership of it. And one of their focuses is on how are we going to market this and sell this to our students and make it even clearer for our own students. And one of the ideas that came out of that was that concept of giving the students the opportunity in 8th grade this year to visit each of the pathways and coming up with a schedule of exactly what that's going to look like. So we're in the planning stages of that. So more information to come.
right.
Meredith,
Thank
I don't know
you.
if there's anything you want to add on to that. Did I miss any big pieces?
No, but when appropriate, we would love to give an update of where we're at, and we can do that.
Yeah. So
Maybe at the
that
meeting after.
agenda coming up, we'll have an item, because one of the things we had talked about actually was doing an agenda item on internships. And we'll talk a little bit about how internships and how they may be more aligned to the pathways, and then doing a pathways presentation as well in terms of just what's happening. And as I said, PBL. I think there'd be a real value in doing a PBL presentation.
Yep, that would be great. Thank you both very much for that. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Nope.
Okey-dokey. So where does that bring us to?
That brings us to MCAS scores.
Oh, yeah.
Our favorite subject.
Right, I know. All the letters went out, so I'm sure it's been a topic
Give me a second here.
In many homes.
Just let me get the presentation up. So Meredith is going to take us through our presentation of our MCAS scores.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Erickson.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure I may chime in here and there along the way.
I was going to actually ask you or invite you to co-present. Are you?
Oh, I'm not sharing.
Sorry.
Let's try that again. There we go.
Great. Thank you so much. So hopefully everybody at home can see the presentation as well. Thank you. So I know this is an annual fixture that we address in October after the MCAS items are released to the public and the press has the opportunity to take their spin on it. And tonight we'll continue to talk about that. Kind of the big picture itinerary for this presentation is to review the current research and findings on the pandemic's long-lasting effects on test scores in general, and then to discuss how we fared on the 2022 spring MCAS, and to revisit our multi-year efforts to support the student gaps that have been created by the pandemic. So in terms of current research and findings, if you consume any form of media, you've probably heard information about various test scores. This is the time of year that we hear not only about MCAS, but ACT and SAT. So here are just some things that we've curated over the past month or so. So from the Wall Street Journal, ACT scores dropped to the lowest level in more than 30 years. From the New York Times, the pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in math and reading. And then more locally, the Boston Globe earlier this month said new MCAS data underscore missed learning of the pandemic. What if kids can't catch up? Dun, dun, dun. And then even from today, the headline in the Boston Globe talked about student test scores tumbling, not in terms of the MCAS, but in another metric that's used called the nation's report card. And that is a randomized offering that happens throughout the world, really, and gives nations the opportunity to compare how their students achieve. And then in response to this particular bit of information, when this came out, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education said when scores are averaged across all 4 tests, Massachusetts continues to rank first in the nation overall. At the same time, states nationwide, including Massachusetts, saw declines in absolute scores when compared to 2019, underscoring the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on student learning. So I highlight these headlines because we're just consistently seeing the effects of the pandemic, and you'll notice that in our data. So trends across Massachusetts, the effects of COVID continue to impact student achievement, especially if you compare them to 2019. Also, just some things to remember that MCAS was restored to its full length assessment. If you remember, in 2021, we did administer MCAS, but it was an abbreviated number of tests. In grades 3 through 8 across the state, they saw what they're calling historically low writing scores. And a data point on that has been alarming is that 31% of students, so 1 in 3 students in grades 3 through 8, had at least one essay score of 0. So writing is obviously embedded throughout the entire MCAS, but we've never seen scores like that before.
That stuck with me for whatever reason. So I attended a training from the state on the MCAS exam. And some people asked I don't think Meredith was on that training. Some people asked, like, what did that mean? They just didn't do it, or and the person who was running the training said both. It was just some students didn't answer questions. Some students answered questions but got just no points for them. So that's on the essay. So that's crazy that a third of the students got at least 1 0 across the state of Massachusetts on one of the essay questions. Or not one in total, like not, it wasn't one specific question. It wasn't like it was a failed question. They were just
Right,
saying
they had at least
in
one.
general,
Yeah, that's
across the test.
How many essays are on there?
Uh,
I think it depends on the grade level.
level,
So
It could be a time thing too, but.
But usually they're embedded early on in the exam. And the test is also untimed.
Okay.
So students can take as long as they like to take the MCAS exam.
one of the things we
Well,
had,
they have to take it within the school day.
Yeah.
They cannot go beyond the school day,
Right.
but that affords them a lot of time.
I will say, and I feel like teachers echoed the same sentiment, that there was a marked difference in test stamina of students last year compared to when they last took a full-length test in 2019. So I think there's a component of that as well. And then another trend across Massachusetts is just, again, historically high rates of chronic absenteeism. So the state defines this as missing 18 or more days of school. So 28% of our students were, 28% of the state.
Both.
Okay.
So our numbers actually match the state numbers
Thank
on this
you.
one.
That's alarming.
Yeah. And
But
62,
if they gotta stay out 5 days because they've been.
That's true too, yeah.
right. And we'll show you some data around chronic absenteeism, but this doesn't capture the fact that in addition to students having to stay out, that oftentimes if teachers fell ill, the protocol for obvious reasons was that they had to stay out as well. So you're looking at kind of the compound effects of the pandemic.
And again, the number that I found striking here, 28% is a crazy high number. So as a point of comparison, for the couple years prior to the pandemic, our chronic absenteeism rate in Carver was around 7%. And so it went from 7% to 28%. The number I found staggering was the 62% of students statewide and in Carver missed 10 plus days of school.
But that makes sense to me. If a student gets COVID twice, I mean, there's your 10
Right.
days right
Or it even could be a 10 days with the one COVID experience.
Oh,
And
yeah,
really,
I
if you
mean,
look
10
at
days with one,
the
yeah.
percentage of our students who had COVID last year, we had a couple big surge periods. We had a big surge in January, and actually we had a big late year surge in May.
in May. Yeah.
So we had a lot of students in May who were out, and even like if you really start compounding those numbers between the students being out and then teachers being out, so how many days were they in school but they didn't have their teacher?
Yeah.
So and I don't have a way to track that. I don't have a data point to say, yeah, this. Could we go back and say this student and look? Obviously, we have all of the teachers' attendance. We have everyone's attendance. Could we do it? But we didn't go back and like track this student and say, well, they missed 15 days of school, but their teachers missed X number of days of school. So really, they missed where they had a substitute. A third of the year. So we were back in school full force, but it wasn't the same. And so when I attended this state training, they really focused on look at your chronic absenteeism, look how your chronically absent students performed, and then the impact on that on your overall scores. So we have a little bit of that in the presentation.
Okay, that makes
Thank
sense.
you.
Thank you. So the effects of COVID continue to impact student achievement. Again, statewide math generally increased by 6%, but English language arts declined by 5%. And that is for all students throughout the Commonwealth in grades 3 through 8. And as we just mentioned, the writing scores and the number of students that received at least 1 0 on an essay contributed to that. So what the state is advising us to do when it comes to looking at this data is to look at 2022 as a new baseline and then to expect to start seeing growth in 2023. And just as a general pre-pandemic rule of thumb, when talking about the impact of instruction, it used to be that for every 1 year of ineffective instruction, it takes 3 years to get caught up. And so I would say that the pandemic in general obviously pushed on students' ability to receive consistent instruction like they did before the pandemic. And so it's going to take multiple years to get out of this, which we talked about last year when we talked about unfinished learning and disrupted socialization. Another piece from DESE is that they they prepared this grid just to remind folks when the last full administration took place. So that was in 2019, and they said 2022 school year was the first full MCAS administration for grades 3 through 8 since 2019. Grade 10 students in 2022 had not taken an MCAS test since 7th grade, a full MCAS test. So when you put it in that context, that's a significant amount of time, especially for the amount of growth that adolescents typically have academically. So that is why they're cautioning us to not look at 2019 data as a baseline, but look at 2022 as the new normal. So now if we look at longitudinal trends from 2019 to 2022, we're going to just compare the state to Carver, and you'll see very similar lines of change that take place. So in English language arts, you'll see that at the state level, that 52% of students were meeting or exceeding expectations on the MCAS in 2019. That plummeted to 41% in 2022. And then if you look at Carver, you'll notice that our numbers are lower, but you're recognizing that same line of decline for English language arts in Carver, grades 3 through 8. Likewise, the state in ELA in grade 10 had a little bump during 2021, but then declined again in 2022. And we see that same experience with Carver. So that's for English language arts. For math, in grades 3 through 8, we noticed at the state level a slight incline coming out of 2021 into 2022, like they mentioned. And again, we parallel that same trend. And then in math, in grade 10, you see a movement from 59 to 52 to 50. And in Carver, we went from 62 to 57 to 53. So we are above the state in terms of the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations, but that same line. And then if you look at science, science only occurs in grades 5 and 8 in the K through 8 span. And so you'll notice that we go from 48 to 42 to 42, kind of flatlined. And in Carver, we notice a slight uptick in grades 5 and 8. So still a similar overall decrease. So then we come to the impact of attendance. So as Mr. Neef mentioned, there was a significant rise in chronic absenteeism, and you're right, it's understandable given that it's the pandemic, but obviously it weighs heavily on this form of assessment. So I created two graphs, one that just took our chronically absent students and measured their performance. The blue column at 1% is the percentage of students that were chronically absent that exceeded expectations on the MCAS for ELA, and then 23% met expectations. And so that left side is looking specifically at chronically absent. On the right side, you'll see a similar graph with different numbers, and these are all the students that were not chronically absent. So if they did miss school, they did not miss more than 18 days. However, embedded in here are that large percentage of students that miss somewhere between 10 and 18. Even so, you'll notice that there's a significant difference in terms of the number of students or the percentage of students that were meeting or exceeding. So a 10-point difference between those students that were chronically absent and those that were not chronically absent. When we move into math, we notice that that gap widens, and there's an 18-point difference for math. And then we also have an 18-point spread in science. So we know that the impact of the absence was huge. So now looking forward to how do we move on from here? What are the actions that we're taking? The first piece is to look for the bright spots, because the data is not overwhelmingly positive, but I will say it is consistent with what so many other districts are reporting and what we're seeing at the state level as we look at those trend lines. So if we analyze it further at kind of a grade level, we notice that we outperform the state in achievement in 4th grade math and in 10th grade math, and that we outperform the state for growth in 4th grade math and in 7th grade math. And then if you just look at the average scaled score, so what is Carver's average scaled score compared to what is the state's average scaled score, we're only 2 points off from the state in elementary mathematics. So if their average scaled score is like a 494, we were a 492. So that's that comparison. We're only 2 points off. And then we're only 1 point off from the state in elementary ELA and in 10th grade math, and 1 point off from the state in 5th and 8th grade science. So we're talking about small numbers that end up getting turned into large percentages, but I just wanted to put it in context that way. And then to date, we have done a fair amount of work and will continue to do more work as a district. So at the beginning of October, we met as a district team to analyze data on a broad scale, and that involved Mr. Neef, myself, the building principals, department chairs, and the elementary math and literacy coaches. And we looked at some actions that we could take at the building level, including how we could engage grade level teams at the elementary school in grades 3 through 5 and departments at the middle high school in English and in math and in science. And so some of that work has begun and is ongoing. One of the things that the middle high school has done, and it's proven to be very successful, is rather than looking at MCAS at the department level only, they've broken off into pairs and triads depending on what the focus is. For example, with English language arts, they've taken 6th and 7th grade ELA teachers and work with the department chair to analyze what the 6th and 7th grade results have been. And through that process, they've been able to identify strengths that our students had on the assessment. And they've done an item analysis. And then they've also looked at how we can adjust the curriculum and what other cultural norms we can agree to in order to prepare for this next round of MCAS testing. So to give you some examples of that, one piece is to talk about helping students to see that when the MCAS is asking you to write an essay or a constructed response, what that means, what that looks like, and trying to model those experiences for students well before they take the assessment. To have the opportunity to have some MCAS practice. So as you know, the MCAS moved from a paper-based test to a computer-based test several years ago. But one of the challenges, particularly for complex math, is having students write it out all the time on paper in class, and then you get to the test and everything is digital. So making sure that there's an opportunity for students to practice with that interface. The opportunity to build back structure and time for benchmark-like tasks and time to commonly score them among teachers so that they are all looking for the same factors that contribute to meeting the frameworks. And then to even do things like address test anxiety ahead of time, or to celebrate the hard work and success that our students have on MCAS. They've also been as nuanced as to find other ways that we can support students. For example, developing a new common assessment in argumentative and persuasive writing, to set up the structure of essays, and then in math, things like making sure that students have the opportunity to interpret and create and graph inequalities with one variable, and then to compare measures in 2 data sets and that sort of thing. So we know our students do well on graphing on coordinate planes, and that a relative strength for them is statistics and probability, but then looking at some of these other pieces as well. So that's an example of some of the data that has been discussed thus far. And then the other piece that has come up in conversations in both buildings is just helping students to recognize when they take the assessment, what is the question actually asking? So sometimes we have what we call tier 2 vocabulary that gets embedded into a test question, and it will ask a student to evaluate something or to compare and contrast, and making sure that we have an opportunity to explicitly teach students how you work with that word and what that word means when you see it. So in addition to that, we have student-centered supports that we have built in for this year and will continue to develop. So we have money set aside for tutoring to be able to support some MCAS support for students. And right now we're in the process of brainstorming some engaging formats so that students feel like they're getting an engaging experience that sounds exciting before, during, or after school, but really addresses whatever deficits may be there. And then at the high school in the WIN block, there's an opportunity for small group academic support. I don't know if you want to add anything else about that, Scott. And then at the elementary level, we have small group support for grades 3 through 5 during the WIN block there, which is different than the WIN block at the high school, and the opportunity to have small group interventions or small groups with their homeroom teacher.
In terms of the WIN block at the middle high school, so right now there's not any specific MCAS tutoring that's occurring. But even last year when we were discussing this with teachers, there was a very focused piece of our MOA with them was that, the administration could make decisions to ask teachers to do MCAS tutoring, teach MCAS support classes as part of that WIN block. And I think we have actually, Christine hasn't heard this yet, but we do have a meeting coming up tomorrow for our all team. I'm going to talk about that. I think we'll have to think of some creative ways to bring some specific MCAS tutoring and offer some specific MCAS tutoring during the WIN block. And we have the opportunity to do that from whenever we can get it going, November, December, until the time of the exam. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be the only thing students would do during the WIN block. I'm not saying we're going to have them do 5 days of MCAS tutoring, but it might be a day or 2 out of the cycle where we've offered those supports to different grade levels.
So that's the end of my formal presentation, but I would love to answer any questions that you have.
I have one question. I know back in the spring, we talked a lot about the changes that are coming with the test scores that are required for graduation. I know those aren't in effect yet. Those go into effect, I believe, in 2026. But there are test scores. So last year's sophomores who are now this year's juniors, so their tests that they took in the spring there is a required passing score for graduation, right? There's a graduation component to the scores that were just released.
Yes.
So do we have calculated like any percentages of like how many of them achieved an acceptable passing score versus how many need to go on to like a learning improvement plan or anything?
Yep, that was one of the very first things that we did. And then Mrs. Cabral reached out to families for anybody who would need to take a retake and has worked with her staff on tutoring for that because the retakes occur at different times during the year.
Oh, okay, so they'll
So
have an opportunity.
the first retake is in November.
Oh, okay,
for
all
math.
right, perfect.
And ELA, and then there's a retake for science in February.
I'm
And
just
then there's
curious.
another retake, but Christine, I don't know if you remember the number off the top of your head of how many 10th grade students did not pass. It's 5 or 6.
I think it's 6.
Yeah.
So it's like a small percentage. I was just curious because with the trends being so down, I wondered like how many students
Yeah.
that
So
impacted.
our greatest area of scoring was the kind of the approaches expectations.
Okay.
So it's not meeting expectations.
Well, that goes to my question, because I'm looking at the graphs with the impact of the absences. Majority of students are partially meeting, as opposed to ideally, we would all want to be meeting, right? But so I guess historically, what have you seen in terms of, is it average that kids just partially meet? Or should we be, I mean, obviously we want to be meeting, but I guess just looking at this, is it your, historically that you've seen that partially meets gets them to where they need to be, or do they really need to be in meeting?
Well, ideally, we would like everybody to be meeting. And obviously, this year with our test scores going down, there are a greater number of students who are not exceeding and meeting. But with that said, the test has not at this point been built in a way that all students can get exceeding or meeting. We haven't seen that in any area districts either.
And so just to give a point of comparison, I put one of the slides back up. Now this isn't our 10th grade scores. This is specifically on chronically absent versus not chronically absent district-wide. So Meredith actually did these numbers based on, didn't matter what grade or what level you were in. It was just, were you chronically absent? And if you were chronically absent, what did you get as a score? And were you not chronically absent, what did you get as a score? But in some ways, it's consistent with our overall, this is what you see for our data by grade level. And we didn't do a lot of grade level specific slides tonight. We didn't take you through 8th grade, this was their exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting. But this slide is fairly consistent with what you'd see. You know, we need to move students in each category, and our largest category is partially meeting. Partially meeting right now for the 10th graders is considered a passing score, but they're changing that a little bit. They're moving that number up a little bit.
Right.
But that's not where it is now.
Right.
So we want to move students from partially meeting to meeting. We want to move students from meeting to exceeding.
Right.
And obviously we want to move your not meeting out of not meeting and into partially meeting. So we want to be pushing everybody up. But these graphs are actually fairly consistent. You know, obviously the combined overall scores would be in math. This would be everybody if you took those two graphs and kind of meld them together and used your 28% versus 72%. So that your not chronically absent was 72% of the kids. Your chronically absent was 28% of the kids. You bring those two slides together, and that's going to be a mishmash of what it looks like overall for our entire school population. And our 10th grade students had the highest scores, but the 10th grade students always have the highest scores across the state. As I said, that's what we said the number of students who were not meeting and needed to do the retest was 5 or 6. It was a handful of students that we've been obviously in direct contact with. So I think the answer to your question, Colleen, maybe, is our largest area right now is partially meeting. And we need to move some of those kids from partially meeting to meeting, or as many of those kids as we can. And as we move forward, and hopefully we'll see a trend where the meeting chart is higher than the partially meeting as we move forward.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Right? Hopefully we'll see those chronically absent numbers rapidly decline.
Yes.
Yes, I hope so.
And-
So far this year, I can pull some data for you, but so far this year, attendance has been much better. So student attendance is better, staff attendance has been better. So I think that's a good thing. So I don't think we'll be at the 28 and 62% for chronically absent and missing more than 10 days
Right, which is definitely.
if we stay on our current trends.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you guys have already started looking at this and all of the different ways that you're looking at this. I know a lot of students have anxiety around MCAS especially. So it's great that you're taking those things into consideration and giving them practice opportunities and destigmatizing it and trying to take the fear away, because I think that will be beneficial for everyone. So thank you for all of that detailed information. I appreciate it. Anyone have any questions or any comments?
Do we know when will they be taking them this year?
Yep, in March and in May.
March and May.
March, okay.
The M months.
Right, and then, anyway, thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
All right, moving on to upcoming events.
Some good stuff?
Yes, we do have a lot of exciting things going on. So even over the next week, this week in both buildings, got a lot of great stuff. PSATs for juniors tomorrow in the building. I know we talked about that last time a little bit because we gave the SATs. So that's been a huge change in that is all students are able to take the PSAT and SAT in school. Silly Sock Day, I'm not going to read the whole list. It's up there for you to take a look at. This color doesn't come out great on that screen. It might be a little hard for you to read. We like the colors. I was telling you, I like this nice fall color scheme.
Yeah, fall color. Yeah, but even the
Uh,
charts were fall color themed.
See if I make it a little bigger so it comes out a little better.
I can say just fine.
Yeah.
And obviously we have the pumpkin parade coming up. We have a Halloween social for our middle school students, the PTO trunk or treat at the elementary school. There's a lot of great events coming up over just this week. And then as you go into November, same thing. I'm not going to read everything here for everyone. But we have a lot of outstanding events, and we'll be publicizing all of these things and looking to get people out and to prepare. And obviously, we've mentioned the mock presentation on the 15th at 6:30, but I'll mention it again. So November 15th, 6:30, virtual. We'll be sending out information shortly to the community about that, encouraging parents to attend. And we're looking forward to that from Dr. Englander. Football game, the Thanksgiving Day football game is away this year, so we're at Middleborough. So we'd encourage everybody to go out and attend there. That would be great. And as I said, we got a lot of great stuff coming up in November as well.
Absolutely. Can I ask a brief question about the football game?
Sure.
Do we ever do away buses for students?
We
to
have.
attend?
If
Have
we
we
have-
ever in the past? I wasn't sure. So
We do. We have. If there's a
there's-
student need and interest, we
Okay.
have. So if there was student interest or need, generally it's happened for tournament games.
Yeah.
But if there was a student interest for a particular game, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. I was just curious. It's had me thinking back to a long time ago when I used to attend my own high school Thanksgiving football games. And I mean,
Yeah.
the homecoming game was so well attended. It was great to see
Yeah, I
such a
heard there was a
huge
great
crowd. I
turnout.
would love to see that translate for the Thanksgiving game for our students there anyway. So
We get a lot of alumni at Thanksgiving too, because people are home for the holidays.
yeah.
Nice.
So anyway,
And moving on to recommendations.
yes.
I'm going to turn it over to Ron for a little bit.
Ooh,
So
budget calendar.
budget
very-
calendar,
very
budget
exciting.
transfers, and financial updates.
Our next favorite subject. No, I'm
We,
just
we,
kidding.
we mean that, I meant that genuinely wrong, just so you understand, that is, I think we're all genuinely looking forward to.
We do, we are.
That's
Yes.
okay. This is
I'm an accountant. I actually do love
So-
budgets.
Yeah. Well, the fun stuff is the teaching and learning. Our job is just to help them, support that. So your first item today is just your FY24 budget calendar. I know it's only October, but we've already started the budget planning process. What you have in front of you is just a brief summary that gives you the highlights of the budget season for us. As you can see, it really does start in early October and brings us right through to town meeting. Don't give it a final date for that yet, but it's typically right around the 12th, 13th, 14th. And so we, in our planning process, we start with that in mind and we work our way backward to make sure that all the right groups of staff and leadership team has input in the process and their needs and priorities, both in terms of the operating budget as well as our capital planning. Our process is going to be very much the same as we've had last year as well. We start with that sort of zero-based budgeting, identifying priorities and needs. Each building identifies those priorities and needs from their staff. Building principals work with their leadership teams to adjust any of those priorities as needed based on what's going on in their building. Each building then presents their budgets to Superintendent Neef. We finalize those typically around Christmas time. Over the Christmas break, I'll sort of combine all of that for us and come back in January to review with our district leadership team and then obviously with the school committee. We have what we call our line in the sand in February. So February 1st is our line in the sand for a lot of our estimated budgetary costs, health insurance costs, and a lot of our out-of-district placements as well. We use February 1st as that number. So thereafter, we've got a pretty firm idea of what your budget looks like. It also times pretty nicely with the governor's proposed budgets. Past 20 years, the governor usually proposes budgets right around that third week of January. So we're looking in that first week of February to have a pretty firm budget for you by that point, with a goal of the school committee to vote in March in preparation for annual town meeting in April. So that's your calendar. I'll open up to any questions that you may have.
That looks great.
Yeah, no, it's great to see, and I see that you guys are going to be using SoftWrite for that. Is that the first time this year?
We used it last year as
Okay.
well. We do a blended model, so at the sort of staff input level, it's Excel sheets and opportunities to put in requisitions and requests. And then at department levels or grade levels, depending on the school, that's sort of aggregated and then put into SoftWrite. So we can take a look at it, and it really just helps, a leadership team not just see this year, but also see years past as well. So you can start to see those budget trends, those actual trends, as you bring together your final budget for approval.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, budget transfers and the financial memo.
So if you look at your financial memo, there's not a lot on it right now. It's pretty quiet, which is what you want in your budget. You're in quarter two, financial quarter two. You see your payroll and your expenses there, payroll down to the penny as always. You happen to be at a weird timing right now. We have an expense warrant that literally just went out, but we'll have that processed for you and on your next agenda. We do this a couple days in advance, so the timing doesn't quite line up there. As for transfers in your budget, your overall budget, that's pretty light as well. Your first tab is your whole budget to date. Again, by every account down to the penny you have there. Your transfers reflect a couple of accounts that need transfer for some additional supplies. We had some back-ordered supplies that are actually still jamming us up with a couple of vendors and a few supply chains. So in some places, we've actually ordered some of those items twice. We can then go back and cancel the orders that we originally had. We're still waiting on things that we ordered in June and July. And your other is just transfer staffing, which transfers on the accounts. Again, net zero transfers on all of your transfers, but I'll answer any questions that you might have for your FY23 quarter two budget.
There was a 2-cent adjustment I'm a little concerned about, Ron.
I'd like to give it all to you, so you have full transparency, every penny accounted for.
Sorry, I'm getting punchy, it's 8:30. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the budget transfers as presented.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Yes.
Ron.
Okay, moving into an update on the Student Advisory Council. So we scheduled our first subcommittee meeting for the Student Advisory Council, but ended up we needed to cancel based on some scheduling conflicts, and we were unable to meet to schedule. We were unable to meet prior to this meeting, and then one of the goals of that first meeting was to discuss our representation at the school board meeting of who's going to be coming all the time, and making out a schedule for that. So we didn't achieve that, so we don't have a representative from the Student Advisory Council here. I also just wanted to discuss a little bit of a concern I have about having the meetings going forward in the evening, and really wanted to get some advice from the committee on how to proceed or some direction from the committee. One option would be to meet with a group of students during the day in the wind block, but obviously that's a little problematic because it would require the members of the committee who are the members of the subcommittee to be available to meet with them at that time. Another option is to just maybe right now the current members of the committee are Colleen and Katie. Maybe I can work with the both of them, see if we can get a time, even if it's maybe during the day, maybe in the evening, just to get together with the group to say, hey, let's hammer out a schedule for the rest of the year. Let's get it all down and say these are the evenings we're going to meet, these are the times we're going to meet, and try to go forward with that. I do have a little bit of a concern about regular attendance of all 5 members of the group in the evening, but this was also just one time, so I don't want to totally change the system and have to, the reality being probably have to vote new members of that subcommittee if we were going to meet during the wind block, and really wanted to put the problem out there, wanted to explain why we didn't have a representative from the Student Advisory Council here this evening, and take input from the committee on what we'd like to do. So in my mind, those are the 2 viable options. Have new members and see who will be willing to or able to meet during the day. I don't want to say willing because colleague Kate has nothing to do with willing, because that's to do with the reality of your jobs. Or would see if we can pick up time, see if we can get together with the kids and actually hammer out a schedule for the year for evening meetings, and go from there. So I guess I turn it to you just for advice.
I think if we're thinking about meeting, you said every 6 weeks, not even every month, if we had a set schedule and it was an evening time that people could make arrangements to do that,
Mm-hmm.
I can make myself flexible 4 days if it's well in advance, but then also maybe something could come up at work and I could get stuck, but you know, that would
Right.
be something I couldn't predict. So I'm in favor of continuing to try to figure out evening meetings, considering it's only gonna be every 6 weeks. That was my thought.
And that was a little bit of a thought, is that maybe the group would meet not in between each meeting, because that would be a meeting every 3 weeks, but maybe it would make sense that they met in between every other meeting. And obviously we'll look at the meetings where we only have 1 month and we'll kind of lay it out for the year. And I'm fine with that as well. So
I know that when they met, I know, I think it was Christine shared that, Mrs. Cabral shared that all the students, when they applied, had to make the commitment that they would be available on a Monday night for a meeting. So I wonder if a Monday night would be an amenable time. And if a Monday night isn't available to set the schedule, maybe, you know, Mr. Neef and Ms. Cabral could meet with the students during a win and say, we would like you to meet with the school, like maybe you guys can have like a meeting in the school, because I know like Katie works in a school, so I imagine that would be very challenging for her to be able to get out in the middle of the day. And, you know,
So remember, if you remember, Mrs. Cabral had said, and I had said that there were actually 14 students who showed some level of interest, and she was going
Right.
to keep that as a school-based group. So Mrs. Cabral did have her first meeting with the school-based group a week ago Friday, I believe. I attended the second half of it. I actually had a couple things going on that day. And I think we had 10 or 11 or 12, not all 14. Yeah, it wasn't all 14, but almost everybody came. She did actually a great job of taking the students to an activity about what do you think some of the positive things that are happening in school, what are some things you have concerns about, and some of the things that they had concerns about were very manageable. And we walked away from the meeting and said, hey, this is a quick fix that we can do fairly quickly. I don't know, can I share the one concern?
It's already in action.
It's already out. So one of their concerns was, you know, in going into the bathrooms, they don't have any place. There's no hooks in the bathrooms, so you can't go into the bathroom and
Put your purse.
put a bag up, put a purse up, put a coat up, put a jacket up, or
Yeah.
put the pass, because we're asking students to carry passes again.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, we weren't doing any passes, but just for building safety, security, control on some levels. We want to make sure the kids are in the hallway. We know where they are and they're where they're supposed to be. So we are using passes again. And they just said, you know, we go into the bathroom and we feel like
Yeah.
so there's no hooks on the inside of the doors.
there's no place to put anything.
Did they come off, or were they ever there?
I don't think they were ever there. I mean, you guys can go back and try to think. You attended the school. I don't know what your memories
I
are.
haven't.
Except for
Those details are gone from my brain.
It's funny that you mentioned it, because I just read an article today about how the locker use trend is way down. They're
Way
carrying
down.
all their stuff with them. Totally valid concern. I get it completely. Did we have a lot of interest in the lockers this year?
That I have to turn to Mrs. Cabral. I don't know.
No. So yeah. So the hooks. Yeah.
But absolutely, the trend is to not use lockers.
No,
for
it
whatever
is. It
reason.
absolutely is. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So that makes sense.
And then, so we figured that's a pretty easy fix.
That's easy.
So
Wicked
Mrs.
easy.
Cabral met
That's
with the
great.
custodians. We're ordering hooks to put on all the doors.
Nice.
And, you know, so, and then one of the other consistent concern we talked about that day, which is a little more problematic in terms of long-term solution, and I spoke to them about it a little bit, is they mentioned the locker rooms. And that's something we as a committee have discussed, and I just mentioned that
They're not
the locker rooms are subpar, which I don't think anybody would disagree with. It just comes into a larger capital discussion. I started to talk to them about that a little bit, about, you know, the extent of that project. But then we started to have some conversations of if we can't just like tear them down and rebuild them and remodel them, which is what really needs to happen. So like I acknowledge that those probably need to be like totally overhauled.
Gutted.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need to be gutted and redone.
Fumigated,
But-
yeah.
If we're all agreeing, which they didn't give a lot of pushback on the rationales as why we said we may or may not do that. I mean, I talked about things like, you know, eventually in 12 to 15 years, we're going to start planning for a new school. And the community has to make decisions of, we said that would be a multi-million-dollar project, you know.
Yeah.
And I understand it's a generation of students, but I don't know if the community, we haven't gone into a lot of depth if the community would support a couple multi-million-dollar projects to totally refurbish those locker rooms. But we took a step back and said, what can we do? So what are some fixes that we can make now to improve those spaces? So we started to talk about those things. So we had the first meeting of that group. It went really well. We're going to continue to meet with them on a regular basis. And, obviously our 5 members of the smaller student advisory council are part of that, and we're there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can get some representation at these scheduled meetings that we put on the calendar, I think Monday is probably a good idea because, we had originally said that they'd be available Monday evenings.
I'm also available earlier for I'm done at school at 2:30, so I can be available earlier in the day for them.
And what is the circumstances, which you said it was
There was some movement in
There was
games,
two
right.
movement. There was 2 meetings that were moved.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
Which
with the
caused
first one.
which had them be able to come and not be able to come. And one of them was the field hockey team was actually doing a pre-senior night event
Okay.
at one of our representatives' homes, and she was actually really good. She was like, I'm going to come, and I actually said to her, no, your family's hosting an event for the field hockey team. You have to go to that and not come to this. So I will start working with them to see if we can come up with some days that would work. And are you generally available on Mondays?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is remote a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, we could do it remotely.
Maybe we try to do it on Zoom,
I
mean,
right?
because that was the thing is that if they did it during 1 hour, I could zoom in, but because of the type of school I work at, I don't know what my day looks like day to day.
Yeah.
So some days I can sneak away. Other days I'll sneak away, and a student will follow.
But it might even,
Yeah.
make it easier to do some of the evening meetings by remotely. I don't know if that's what you were talking about.
Well,
Kelly.
yeah, because I'm just thinking about the age ranges. Some of them might not be driving, and that might be an issue. And, activities, and they have homework. When you have to travel back and forth to a place to go to a meeting, it actually adds time. So if they were doing it remotely, it might be more feasible for everybody.
Right.
All right. So I will take some of that feedback, and we will definitely get our first meeting scheduled prior to the next school committee meeting on November 14th. And we know we're not going to do next Monday because it's Kelly's favorite holiday.
It is my favorite.
so we're not going to do Halloween. But maybe we can shoot for the next Monday after that, which is something. I know. November 8th.
6th.
Yeah.
7th. It's the 7th.
Yeah, because the
And
14th is our meeting.
I would prefer to be meeting in person just so we can be more collaborative and
Right.
get to know each other. I thought that was one of the bonuses of being on this committee is to
Try and do it in person.
with the students.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
having it a hybrid option,
That would
so
be
that
ideal.
like,
Yeah, I mean,
because
it's
if everyone can't make it,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
Yeah,
keeping your options open.
right? If someone's traveling back to the district from a game, I mean, maybe they
Yeah.
could zoom in from the bus. I mean, not ideal for them,
Right.
but I think to,
Yeah.
try to be flexible because I know that some students will have sports in the
Yeah.
winter and in the spring also. So it might be a good option. But I would prefer to see you guys try to vet something out before we make a change.
And on time, what's the earliest you're available?
I'm done at school at 2:30, so it would take me about half an hour to get to anywhere in Carver. So anytime after 3.
And 5:30, unless we were literally meeting during the middle of the day, and I could figure that out.
Right. Okay. All right. So, you're not opposed to 7 either.
No.
So if I meet with the students and say, hey, we really want to do 7th, what's the time do you think is going to work for you? And the 7th should be a little bit better for us because sports will be winding up in some ways. Though the girls soccer team could have we have 2 girls soccer
game,
players. We have a field hockey
Yep.
player. Could be state tournament games that night,
Yep.
which they wouldn't know until maybe the Friday or Thursday before.
Okay.
So, but we'll work towards the 7th.
Very good.
Great.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the discussion.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, so I don't have my agenda anymore because my computer died.
So the next.
So I think that brings us to reports from the school
Reports from the
committee.
school committee. The first one is policy subcommittee updates. I don't know if you or Jen want to give an update what the policy subcommittee has been doing.
I can give an update.
Something is that?
So we actually had a policy subcommittee meeting right before this meeting, so it's been a power school committee day for Steph and Scott and I. We had our representative from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees with us, and what he's doing is he's begun that process that we voted on of comparing our policies to what Mask's policies are and like highlighting the differences. And so we already went through the first two sections, A and B, and made, our recommendations. And so at our next meeting, we'll have A and B for you guys to have a first reading on. And then the way he explained it to us is that unlike previous policies that we brought out of subcommittee for you guys and where you guys have actually voted to adopt, or we as a committee in full have voted to adopt, we're not going to be adopting each of these sections, but we're going to be approving them in form, meaning it's like an approval, and then we will adopt the whole manual in one. Hopefully by April. We set out all of our meetings for the rest of the year with a very
It's an aggressive time.
aggressive time frame to do the entire
A lot
manual.
of policy subcommittee meetings.
There's a possibility that by the time the manual gets to be approved, it'll be after elections and the makeup of the school committee could or could not be different. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, so we it's fun. So you guys will see the first reading on the first two sections, and then we'll vote the next meeting to approve that in form, and then you'll get your first reading of the next one. So from this point forward, at every school committee meeting, you're going to have a first reading of some sections, and then after that, it'll be a first reading and then an approval in form. First reading, approval in form as we aggressively move through.
It's a
gonna
good
be super
summary.
fun.
Right, and we'll have those, I'm assuming those sections will be available before, like, to committee members before we meet, because some of them are pretty lengthy.
Yeah,
Is there a
and
way that
so-
you have an electronic copy to share with everyone?
Yes, so he's putting together an electronic copy for me that, so really, I'll try to get those into,
The background agenda or
yeah,
something?
or well, before that, prior to
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
because
You
the
can
back,
probably email
the
them out.
right, the background agenda, as you all know, comes out Wednesday or Thursday, and sometimes we're still filling pieces in as we get closer to the meeting. These are, sections A and B are pretty lengthy.
Yes.
We probably spent, the subcommittee, and we probably spent 4 to 6 hours going through those. Over 3 meetings.
Yeah.
It didn't happen all, we didn't have a 6-hour meeting, but it was 2 hours over 3 sessions. You're gonna have to look at it a little bit. So I'll try to get those out. Once I have them, I will send them to the committee. I won't wait for the background agenda.
Great, because clearly we're not going to read every single word of
We're
every
not gonna
single
read that.
policy at any of our meetings.
No, that would have us meeting till wee hours in the morning.
Yeah.
I would think our approach would be get them to you as soon as possible,
Yep.
give you time to prep and prepare. If you have a specific question about any policy, to bring that up to the group and say, I saw this one, I just have a question here, this doesn't make sense to me.
And and maybe
and
if
look at it
there's
as a
any
whole.
particular policy that there's like a significant change on, we would probably highlight that. But I don't think in A and B that we had any significant
No.
changes.
We have not. Okay.
So there's been, but like if there was one where we were like, whoa,
Yeah.
probably highlight that.
Yeah. Yeah, like there have been certain circumstances where we've opted to keep our policy because it's been specifically written for our district. So those you've seen in the last year.
Right, like our sexual harassment policy, which we
Yep.
just
Just-
approved
we
a
just
couple
did, yep.
meetings ago.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, we're not gonna, Rebecca, we were not gonna override that one.
Right, so C and D, for these two sections that we're gonna be working on next, there are 51 pages for those two sections, and I would say what AB is, the AB is not numbered, but
It was
it's
much longer.
much thicker, so you'll have some very interesting reading that you can do outside of our meetings about policy. But I have to say, it's like we mentioned, it is an aggressive schedule, but I don't know, I think it's been really great so far to collaborate and ask questions and get feedback from Jim at Mask. So I think it's going to be a worthy investment.
Yeah.
Excellent. Cool,
And,
sure.
and then the second item on reports from the school committee was conference update, which I think you wanted to do something.
Yes. as everyone knows, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees joint conference with the Massachusetts Association of Superintendent of Schools is coming up the first week of November. And every year, they have a delegate meeting within the conference where communities across the state can, districts can bring forth resolutions that they want to see MASC work on throughout the year. And as a part of that delegate meeting, each district is supposed to officially declare a delegate to vote at the delegate assembly on behalf of their district. So I wanted to bring this to everyone because historically Carver hasn't done this, just because we just weren't aware of it or didn't participate with MASC as much as we are this year. Which I think is just a good opportunity for us to learn, more about things that are happening across the state that maybe we want to look at for Carver, like the Student Advisory Council, which I think is great. I'm so excited that you guys have already gotten feedback from them and that you've already been able to put something into action. Even that small little, change, sure means so much to them. But anyway, I digress. I'm just super excited about that. So I wanted to bring this to all of you and see what everyone's feelings were. I will be there. As everyone knows, I am Division 7 of MASC chair. So I will actually have a divisional meeting at the conference, which will be a great opportunity to learn best practices and meet other people in other districts in our division and across the state with the entire conference. So I will report back on that as well. So I think everyone should have received the delegate manual in the mail. It has all the information in there about the resolution. So I was actually on the resolution committee with MASC, so I am very much embedded in where all of these came from. Have had a lot of robust discussions about them, which was a great opportunity again to learn from others. So I wanted to see if anyone else, I don't know if anyone else is attending the conference during the day or is going to the delegate assembly that would be interested in being the delegate for our district. Clearly I will be there, but that's something that we as a committee should vote on to officially designate someone a delegate to represent us. So I will report back clearly everything that happens and bring the resolutions to everyone, depending upon what's adopted. And I'm sure they'll probably have electronic files that I can share with everyone to see if there's anything that we as a committee, want to stand behind and get further involved with trying to advocate for across the state. So that is that.
So I think Stephanie's looking for a motion.
So if someone would like to make a motion.
I motion to make you the delegate at the meeting.
I will second Stephanie as being our delegate at the meeting.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? No? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I promise I will do my most best to make all of you proud in representing Carver Public School District at the conference. So I'm very excited to see what other best practices I can bring back, and they have some really great professional development opportunities that I'm looking forward to. A couple of with student advisory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's actually one about the electronic school bus funding, Ron, which I thought looked kind of interesting. But anyway, so those are our two formal reports from the school committee. Does anyone have anything they want to share before we adjourn on this Monday evening?
Just one thing.
Okay.
So this past weekend, 53 of our students in our district competed in their very first cheer competition for Pop Warner. They stepped on the mat, performed fabulous routines in front of thousands of spectators. Really, it was quite overwhelming how many people were there. And I would like to congratulate our JV cheers team for their win, first place, for their very first cheer competition. Some of them very first year cheering. It was amazing. So I want to say congratulations to all of them and great job to all of our athletes who competed this weekend. Happy Halloween, everybody. I can't wait. I'm very excited about all the events. We will be attending the trunk or treat and the haunted house this weekend, so very excited about that.
Nice.
And I wish the girls varsity soccer team the best of luck in their tournament.
I would second all of that emotion. Congratulations to the JV team and all of the cheerleaders that competed, because that can't be easy.
Oh, it was very overwhelming.
And like really root for the soccer team. So excited to see how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
Oh, we know the fun that happens on a weekday holiday, so I hope everybody has a very happy and safe Halloween. And for all of our teaching and administration staff, I'm sending you vibes of focused learning for Monday and Tuesday, and if not, just copious amounts of coffee. Good luck.
Right, to combat that sugar high everyone's going to be on Tuesday.
Something.
Oh my gosh.
I'd like to thank Meredith and Scott for your presentations. They were great, very thorough. And I'm looking forward to working with Katie and the student representatives and, just to make this Student Advisory Council go forward and develop the program for the future. Thank you, Ms. Cabral.
Yeah, I'm so very excited. Okay, so very briefly, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Lamoureux and everyone from town government who came to the civics fair for the sophomores last week. It was really great to see the format this year. I thought it was really successful. Kids would have the opportunity to visit almost all of the tables with school committees, select board, town planner, town administrator, fire, police, EMS, and then some other departments in town. It was really great to have them ask us questions.
And we actually had great representation from the town this year.
Yeah, I thought
We're
it
only
was
missing
great.
the town clerk. Well, I should call it. We only missing a couple.
Yes, yeah. It was really great to see the town well represented, as you'd said, and it was great to see. It happened to be on the same day as Spirit Week, so it was Country versus Country Club.
Yes.
Which was a very fun theme. So it was great to see how enthusiastic all the kids were about that. So just want to give them a shout out and saying thank you for putting that together. I think it's worthwhile.
The town hall department heads were disappointed that I had not told them.
Yes,
that
they
was the
were
theme
very
of the
much
day.
so.
So several of them said they would have dressed up in the theme
Yep.
if I had communicated that to them. So that's my fault because I did not do that.
I considered.
I don't know if I believe them though. No, I did.
No,
Some of them for sure would have shown up in plaid and cowboy hats.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of them were very adamant. I knew, but I thought, oh, you know what? But hey, next time if it falls in the same time frame, absolutely, why not? That will just give the students a hoot, I'm sure.
Yes, I got to teach my daughter how to tie her cardigan around her shoulders because she went country club. So
nice, yeah. It was really great to see all of the different activities from Spirit Week. Culminating with the homecoming football game, and like I mentioned earlier, there was really a great crowd. It was really great to see so many people come out and support the football team and support one another. So kudos for that. And with that, unless anyone has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.